So my name is Nathan Norman. I'm a local community activist. I'm born and raised here in the 5th Ward of Evanston. I'm a part of a collective movement that was established to be advocates against violence and just to support our community, to come out here strong, to show our community that we care and we won't tolerate the violence that's happening within the community. With that said, we also want to offer resources to the young people in this community. We want to let them know that we care also. Black lives do matter, and we want them to know that they matter to us as well. So that's one of the, biggest things that moved me to come up with this idea to how can we show our community that we support them? How can we show the young people that, hey, people that look like them, are in the same community as them, want the best for them? And so this is just one of many efforts to come. We want to do a march next week, and we want to converge on hot spots in Evanston just to show the community and young folks that we care. And so that's one of the main reasons why I thought that it was necessary that we organize and mobilize and come out here and support our community. Last thing I'd like to announce is that Culture Custodian was also a partner of ours in this movement. And as you can see, I have on the Culture Custodian shirt on the back of my shirt. It says resilience. And so, and all of the funds collected from these shirts will be donated to further anti-violence movement. So thank you.
I'm at this event because the kids of our neighborhood need to learn that we've all gone through this in different decades. And it doesn't have to turn out to be violent, and it doesn't have to turn out to be death. When I was a kid, we would go around the corner and they'd make a circle around you and you'd have a fight, and it was over with. Nowadays, people are pulling out guns. It's a very bad way to deal with it. I think they forgot having heart. You gotta have heart.
Well, we're one of many. We're one of many. The main organizer behind you, and that is Nathan Norman. His whole goal is to bring awareness for the entire community to realize that we as black men no longer can stand by and tolerate the violence that's going on. We have to take an active role.
Not only have I been an officer here almost 21 years, this is home. I live here. And so there's a call to action. When we see violence in our community in any capacity, but when we see violence that is concentrated with the same group of individuals in the same communities, in the same age group, with the same groups and organizations, we have to understand that they're speaking to us. They're speaking to us through this violence, that they're not being heard, or there's some trauma, there's some issues that they're dealing with that they need help navigating. And so we want every young man and every young person in this community to know that they're not alone, that they're not on an island, that there are black men all over this city that care about their well-being, that care about their prosperity and their families. That the way that we're resolving conflict with gun violence is not the way that you resolve conflict. And that peace is possible. It is possible when it begins in your household, it begins on your block, that extends throughout this entire community.
Rob Pressoir, kind of working with Culture Custodian and the Black Men Alliance. A couple of days ago, we started to think about how can we impact change within the community. And so one of the things we decided to do was come together for this rally. And so if you look around, all our t-shirts have the lion, which is kind of this majestic symbol. And then the crown kind of represents this concept of heavy is the head that wears the crown. And so as a collective in the community, we're just saying, look, if we come together, all of us can't solve every problem, but we might be able to solve some unique situations with the talents that we have. And so by coming together, we can move a lot faster, a lot quicker, and maybe help a lot more people. And so I think that's what this unique opportunity is really about. Each person kind of has a word on the back of their shirt that they feel more inspired by or what they feel represents. But in total, like all the words really represent everything that we're trying to do as a group. So the back of my shirt, mentor. So I feel like that's really what my swim lane is I've mentored a lot.
I want to say that I appreciate greatly all of these young black men who have come together and decided that something must be done, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month. Something must be done now to stop what is happening in our town. Not one more black man can die from gun violence in the town of Evanston. So many of us are already dying from COVID-19. So many of us are already dying from a resurgence of racism in this country. The idea that we are killing each other is completely unacceptable. We do know that there are extenuating political and social realities that date back hundreds of years. We are not just going on the street and shooting each other. There is a systematic structure that has been developed for us to hate each other in the way that we hate each other. But I'm telling you that love is stronger than hate. This is called bittersweet. It is the story of black men in America. This madness is in me, in my heart, my brain, and blood. And like the power of the Nile, it rises high and often floods. I can't sit on it, press it, or keep it down. It's as close to me as my skin is brown. I open up my eyes and I find it right there. I open up my door, it's in the sun's bright glare. I step outside and stand on the corner of my street, and the madness is in me. Not too bitter, not too sweet, it's bittersweet. The story of the black man is bittersweet indeed. It's a universal story with a universal creed. Like a plant in the garden that began with a small seed, it got bigger and bigger like an evil man's greed. You may well wonder what it is I'm talking about. What is this thing that makes me cry, yell, shout? What's this thing that angers me and makes me just not care? What's this thing that strangles me and takes away my air? It's the story of the black man, and black man is my name. If I'm not really careful, I'll go insane. There's nothing more tragic than a black man's life. From birth to death, it is filled with pain and strife. Such odds are against him as he sleeps in his mother's arms. The only time he'll be thrilled by a woman's charms, because nothing is more thrilling than simply trying to survive. What are the odds that after 20 he'll be alive? Hated and despised for who he is, running and dodging bullets passing by in a blurry whiz. It's tragic to see the future before your eyes and wonder, am I better off dead or alive? There's so much more that I want to say, but there are not enough hours in a 24-hour day to tell you of the pain that I feel. How can I let you know this thing is real? How can I let you in on the black man's plight, except to say it stays with him day and night? He eats it, he sleeps it, he drinks it at every meal. He knows it'll never ever stop until the world we live in is colorblind and knows that we all are one of a kind. Until then, every black man that you look at, when you look at him, recognize there is a bittersweet existence. God bless you and thank you.
Come on, y'all, let's give a round of applause to these mighty men who stepped up in such a time as this for our community. Father God, as we humble ourselves here this evening, God, we come to celebrate life because you're the one that is the giver of life. And Father, we know that no man should take each other's life. But Father, we come to make a mark right here in this place at this hour, at this time. So Father, I pray for these, your people who have gathered here, God, to know that we are here standing in solidarity and unity, oh God, to support the cause that each life matters and no one should take one's life. So Father,
I just want to give a little context to this group, and I'm honored to be a part of the Black Male Alliance. I'm honored to be a part of a group of young black men that wanted to come out and demonstrate and support their community. I'm proud to be a part of this effort. Who we are black men from all walks of life that are concerned about violence and its negative impacts upon the Evanston community. We're specifically responding to the recent loss of life of Evanston black males through gun violence. We are also concerned about social injustice, anti-black racism, white supremacy, and how these social ills contribute to the negative life outcomes for young black men. What do we want? We've come together in solidarity to show our community that Black lives matter. We're calling upon all community members to stand in solidarity with us and contribute their time, their talents, and the much needed resources to prevent future violence from happening in our community. Lastly, our call to action. We want to work in partnership with the young black males in the neighborhoods to develop strategies and plans and actions that will address their growth and developmental needs. Over the next 5 weeks, through community marches, cookouts, neighborhood walks, and one-on-one visits, we will talk with our young men and strategize together to develop conducive community-based solutions to end violence in our community. Our goal is to produce a plan with them that can be shared with stakeholders in the community, the city of Evanston, and other community partners. Because we want to see not only the young people in this community, but also every other resident be able to enjoy their community, be able to support one another, and to be able to, most importantly, live in peace. Black lives do matter, but what we want to show our community today is that Black lives definitely matter to us as well. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you.
But overall, with the violence, I'm tired. You know, I know you guys are tired. I'm tired. You know, it's so senseless. And the problem is, for years, we turned the news on and we saw that plague happen in North Lawndale or Inglewood. But it's at our back door right now. You know, I've been to so many funerals of young Black men who died over senseless acts. With a small conversation, something could have been achieved. And it starts with us. It starts with us talking to young people, asking them what they need. Sometimes they just need to be heard, to be seen. They're invisible. How can that help you fill out a resume? How can that help you fill out an application? How can I help you? And until we start asking them those questions, it's going to get closer to your house. But for now, we have to do what we can to bring them in.
I just want to say, a lot of times people say that violence occurs and nobody does anything about it. Well, these men that are gathered here today are actually doing something about it, not just speaking about it. They're going to be going into the neighborhood and they are going to be meeting young men who are engaged in activities that we'd like to see redirected.
I have to speak out about it. And so my message today is directed towards the youth in Evanston. I was born and raised here in the 5th Ward neighborhood, currently employee of the city of Evanston. And my message today, as I said, is directed at the youth who are growing up during such challenging times where racial inequality and violence has become the norm. I want all you all to know that you are the ones who have the power to reverse the wave, and we need you to join together and speak out against these issues. Back when I was a child growing up in Evanston, we laughed and played all throughout the town without a care in the world. As all kids do, we did have scuffles and disagreements, but it never resulted in gun violence. However, as I grew older, 2 times in my life I've experienced losing close friends to gun violence right here in this town. Craig Smith and Shannon Pickett were 2 close friends of mine who lost their lives in these Evanston streets, which inspires me to speak out on these issues. My one request from the youth in Evanston is to lead by example and make the best choice for your future, not the popular choice. We together as a community must stand in solidarity to combat the violence that continues to plague our neighborhoods. We cannot continue to see families torn apart in these streets where we call home. Myself and a host of other leaders in the community who you will hopefully get a chance to meet today are here for you. We have to learn to discuss issues amongst our peers so that they don't resolve in senseless violence and loss of lives.
We can't do violence intervention or violence reduction without policing. And I know that there is a lot of discussion right now regarding the police department and whether or not we should reinvest resources. Some people call it defund the police. It's talking about reinvesting resources so that they can go into a concerted effort to build a city government that's responsive to community safety needs. And I know that the police chief has talked a lot about this. There's a lot of discussion on the city council about it. And so we wanted to give our great police chief, Demetrius Cook, an opportunity to come and to address us this evening.
It is important that we stand together. When I hear the word defund, that doesn't fear me. It's zero-based budgeting, defunding. It's incremental budgeting, defunding.
It can be, and if that's the will of the public to find programs that could be more suitable for some of the various problems that we face in our society today, that's what I'm here to do. I'm an administrator, not a legislator. This is a big city. You know, we have big city institutions here. We got Metro, CTA, we got a big campus at Northwestern. We got one of the largest high schools in the state. We got the second largest water plant in the state. So this is big city activity here. And my job is to have the available resources and the appropriate amount of resources to protect those institutions and you all as the public, so that we can stand here in solidarity and peace and make sure that the criminal element is out of here. It's your responsibility as well as mine to stand together as community members and fight crime. Don't be afraid to fight crime. These young men here, I'm so happy that they're taking the lead in terms of community involvement, going on the blocks in this town where we have strife, and letting the people know who are out here selling drugs, keeping people up all times of night, firing handguns, endangering our children. Let's protect our children. Let's consolidate and do things together as a group before we have one of our children killed. I live in this 5th Ward. It's a great place to live. I love living in this town. It has so much to offer, but if we don't fight for it, and if we don't start letting these criminals know that we're against violence and we're against negativity and gunplay in our neighborhoods, they're just going to take over. And my door is open not only to my office, but you can just come to my house and knock on the door if you want to talk about an issue. If you want my phone number, my home phone number is 847-864-1210. Knock on my door. If I got something to eat, you're more than welcome. I normally do.
Spin on this. I would like, instead of me listing out names of people that we know have been impacted by gun violence, particularly our black males, I'm going to ask you to list out those names. So 1, 2, 3. One more time. The name that I remember is Wayne Hoffman, 6th grader at Haven. He was a part of our crew, got lost to gun violence in this town. That was my first personal experience with someone being lost to gun violence in my town. Shook me. It is still with me. I still have his obituary at my house. I'm 37. So could you imagine the traumatic impact of that being compounded on our babies every day in some cases? It is up to us to change that. My personal mission in life is to give students back the narrative that has already been written for them. I'm gonna let that sink in a little bit. Because some of you, no shade, are people writing those stories. I have been a person that wrote those stories for kids. So I stand in my truth and intentionally put myself in positions to edit the rest of that story. That is what I did at the Y. I called on these men almost daily. Every time there was a day off of school, one of them came to the Y, because every other middle school kid was there, so we can make space for those kids and help them rewrite those stories. But we made the space so we could have intentional conversations about rewriting those stories. Every day, if you are told the same thing by your peers, sometimes by your parents, by social media outlets, by news, by your government, by your weak president, you believe it. That is very difficult for us to make children in our community responsible for the narratives our society writes for them every single day. It is up to us, particularly the black parents and leaders of this community, to rewrite and edit those stories. That is what I am about. I hope many of you join. We are going to take 60 seconds and take a moment of silence. I'm going to ask you to think about how, in the power that you sit in Evanston, are going to rewrite or help rewrite student stories for them in this town. Because in Evanston, based on my personal purview, Black and brown students are taught to be here and be thankful that we're here. Not taught to interrupt, not taught to disrupt, but just be thankful that you are in the nice suburb that has a lot of money and great schools, even though they still treat you as second-hand citizens. Thank you very much. Please join us in the interruption, the disruption, and the dismantling of systematic racism here in liberal Evanston.
I've lived in this community since 1951, over on Archery Avenue. Fifth Ward, always been a great place, and I don't want to live nowhere else but Evanston, and could have lived somewhere else. We have our problems. We're not perfect. But people come to this community for what we offer. We offer District 65. We offer 202. We offer that beautiful lakefront over there. Northwestern University, graduate class of 1973. We offer diversity. Look at this crowd here. But we do have our problems. And when I found out, as a teacher at Haven Middle School, as an assistant principal, as a principal, that our Black males need the wraparound. Now, Family Focus, and we were blessed to have them at Haven, would come over. They brought that wraparound piece. Our boys need that. At about 3rd or 4th grade, diversity separates with our young people. So where the white and Black children and brown children were together in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, they start separating. Now your athletes stay together because of the basketball, the soccer ball, and so forth. But the other children go their separate ways. We were asked to speak at a school up in Winnetka, K-5, Dr. King program. Me and Boss walk in there, and they got these 2 little guys who are gonna show us around, right? So my guy, he was a kindergartner, had on a shirt, future tribune. Bob Boss's guy had on a Michigan sweatshirt. Well, he's going to Michigan because his father went, uncle went, sister's there, brother's going. He's going to Michigan. In kindergarten, he's going to Michigan. The point I'm making is this. Those children already knew what their life plan is. We gotta understand that our kids don't have that plan. What you men have to do with these young men you're gonna end up mentoring, you gotta be real and honest with them. The elders told me, and the people that I was with in my generation, as young Black men, we gotta be 3 times better. 3 times better than anyone else to get a job. 3 times better than anyone else to buy a house. 3 times better than anyone else to get whatever you want in the U.S. of A. as a Black man in America. Now that was the truth. And it hasn't left that point at all. And so what has happened through integration is we think our Black boys, Black girls think they're on equal terms and they're not. And that's being real and that's being true. They understand it in athletics, working hard. Academics is tough. What happens with our youth and what happens with any type of violence, it's always a disrespect issue. So they got to turn that around, how to deal with the disrespect or the failure that they feel. You got to remember how you were. Remember how you were, you then can turn around and help those students. We got to give our black boys a purpose. More than just athletics. Because when athletics can't go no more, what you got? The Fifth Ward is a great place. Let's keep it a great place. Let's get out there and clean up our streets. Let's take care of our business. Thank you.
But I want to thank the Black Male Alliance. You know, we talk about Black Lives Matter, and many people, including myself, as a black man, say, okay, Black Lives Matter. Where are we as black people demonstrating that? Right? Where are we holding ourselves accountable to that? And I just want to thank you all because you are that. My people, it's been too long. How long? Too long. I live here in the 5th Ward for the last 21 years. I was raised in the 2nd Ward. I've lived in the 5th Ward with my family. And as Chief Cook said, in a matter of 4 days, actually, there were 3 killings, all of black men. Nearly 24 black men have been shot and killed. In the 21 years that I've lived in the 5th Ward, nearly 24 black men have been shot and killed in my neighborhood, where I live at right now in the 5th Ward. Just imagine that. No, I hear that. I see that. We feel that every day. Dozens of times, my wife, my children, from our home, we hear gunshots. Dozens of times during our time living here in the 5th Ward. And yet, we choose to live here. So imagine that. There's something to that. I've seen youth running from gunshots through my backyard. I've had a bullet lodged in my van for 5 years. I left it there. I drove around as a remembrance to all those who've been killed by that bullet. In the past 10 years, there has been over 90 people shot in Evanston. 26 of those people were killed in Evanston just in the last 6 years. A disproportionate number of them were black people, and mostly all were black males. So the thoughts that I like to share with you comes from Brother C.T. Vivian. He was an activist and author. He was a lieutenant of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I'm going to quote him. He says, blacks have a condition, not a problem. Whites have a problem, and that problem is racism. That problem creates our condition. We see that in the world, we see that in America, and we see that right here in good old, beautiful, suburbanite Evanston, the town that I love dearly. But what's happening out there, y'all, is right here in our home and in our backyard. It's a major problem. We have a condition that we have to deal with. Now, we can give a whole historical lesson on the history of the 5th Ward, during segregation, pre-integration, and what we had, what we lost, but the cost that we have had to pay because of integration here in Evanston that we still pay today. That's the condition that we're dealing with. So how do we address this condition? I just want to suggest 2 things really briefly. One, the concept of racial identity development. We all live in a racialized society. Hence, by virtue of that, we all develop a racial identity, whether we realize it or not. And for too many people of color, it's a detrimental identity that not only causes harm in our society, not only in our communities, but within our own lives. We want to talk about white racism. We need to talk about white racial identity development, the process through which that identity of privilege or white supremacy is developed, how it's institutionalized in our society. It's in the air we breathe. It's in the water that we drink. This is not singling out white people and individuals. It is not that. We're talking about an ideology that we are all impacted by. So when we talk about gun violence here in Evanston, we need to look at black identity development and the process through which black people develop that identity, and an identity that is detrimental to who we are as a people. It's based on 2 things essentially: the perception that we all share a common experience by virtue of being black. It's the perception of that. but it's also the perception of who we are as Black people. And too often, that perception that we hold of ourselves has been defined for us. In other words, we are seeing ourselves through the eyes of other people. As W.E.B. Du Bois talked about over 100 years ago, the dilemma of the double consciousness. We're both African and we're both American. And that's a dilemma that we have within us that many of the speakers are talking about, that we are trying to reconcile. And the struggle of that dilemma shows itself in violence in our community. We need a revolution, but we need a revolution within ourselves. We need a new mindset. We need a new perspective and a new eye on who we are as Black people. We as a community must find ways to pool our resources together for the betterment of our youth and the betterment of our adults. As it was mentioned previously, it's going to take a community effort, and it's going to take the resources of everyone in our entire community. This problem is systemic. This didn't happen overnight, so the solution must be systemic. So right now is an opportune time, given this dual pandemic that we are dealing with, to create change. The change has not happened. The change is in the process of happening, but we must participate in that change to be a part of it. And lastly, I want to introduce the philosophy of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is a South African concept of being a human being. Literally, the word Ubuntu means humanity. Philosophically, it means the universal bond of sharing a connection as human beings. In our society today, we are losing the value and the quality and the beauty of being a human being. We are too often being human doings because we're so busy doing, but we've lost the human being, and we must cultivate our humanity. For me, that's where the hope lies, is in our humanity. Archbishop Desmond Tutu says, one of the sayings in our country is Ubuntu, the essence of being human. Ubuntu speaks particularly about the fact that you cannot exist as a human being in isolation. It speaks about our interconnectedness. And when you have this quality, Ubuntu, you are known for your generosity. So when I look out here, that's what I'm seeing. Look at the diversity within this crowd. I want to thank everyone for being here, Black folks especially, because too often we're not represented enough in our own effort. And if you're not Black, I want to recognize you to all the brown people, because we are coming together in arms. All the white people, you know what? We all should be here, but we're all not here. But you all are here, and I just want to recognize you.
I come with a lot of pain and a lot of anger. At 9 years old, my father was gunned down, 8 bullets to his back and 1 through his forehead. And I had just spoke to him the night before. My family tried to protect me from that information, and I stumbled across his body in a room. Messed me up. 2 years later, my stepfather was murdered. There's been so many murders. I don't know if you all remember John from ETHS in the 80s. He used to walk me to this bus stop right here at ETHS. Then he was murdered. My friend Nicholas in ETHS lived near me, gone. I saw him the day before. Gone the next day, murdered, gunned down. The list goes on. And the most recent was my nephew, Xavier Joy, just 3 years ago on the south side of Chicago, gunned down on his way home from work. I have dealt with so many of my Black men in my family and close friends being gunned down that it caused so much anger. I grew up, yes, a very angry Black woman, in a lot of pain. And it wasn't until recently that I decided to take that pain and turn it into action to help all my young Black men and young Black women. I don't have children of my own, so this is my way of taking care of masses of children. Many of us know, learning about Black history, they start our history off as slaves. That's how many of us grew up, just thinking we just started out in shackles and chains. And if you read in those history books, the white man is superior. They're the heroes, they're the leaders. They don't tell you the true history of Black people prior to becoming enslaved and terrorized. They don't teach them that they contributed to medicine and technology and literature and architecture. Do you know what that would do to a young Black boy to know that that's where he truly came from, and not shackles and chains and beaten down by white men? Do you know what that would do for a young Black woman to know the truth of where she came from? I hooked up with Representative LaShawn Ford from the west side of Chicago, the 8th District. He had a bill on the table, HB 4954, and it was to assure that they keep teaching Black history because they were trying to actually take it out of the history books. And I said I would like to write an amendment to that bill where we include pre-enslavement, because it is important that all children, not just Black children, but all children know the true history of Black people, who we are, where we came from, what we have contributed to this country. I truly believe if a young Black man knows where he came from, it would be too difficult for him to pick up a gun and kill anybody who looks like him, because all the men in my family have died by the hands of another Black man. But you know, in my heart, I forgive those Black men. I've come to forgive them. It's systemic racism, what was fed into them that made them hate themselves to the point that they do not value their own life. So then they look at another Black man and they don't value him. So if they're not brought up in a family that teaches them who they really are, then they go to school and they're taught that the white man is the hero and the leader. So this legislation we have been fighting to get passed, where they will change the way Black history is taught. Because I truly believe this bill will start to chip away at systemic racism. It will build, as Dr. Logan had mentioned, self-identity, self-worth, self-value in our Black children, and it will teach other children of other cultures and white children to come to respect who Black people are in this country.
First, we want to bring forward a young man who really was the initiator of this alliance and an initiator of both violence prevention as well as violence interruption in the city of Evanston. I worked for Evanston for 8 years, and we saw a 219% reduction in arrests for 16 to 24-year-old between the years of 2012 and 2018. We had a tremendous program, and parts of it are still in effect today, but I want to say that a lot of what happened between 2012 and 2018 really rests on the shoulders of a young man who has a lot of vision, a lot of leadership, and a lot of impact on our young people in this community. One thing I want you to know, I want the Evanston community to know that Mr. Nathan Norman, he helped save a lot of lives. A lot of bad things that could have happened were prevented because of this young man that I'm bringing up. So I want to bring up Mr. Nathan Norman. I want all of the men to stand and to come forward along with him, and I'm going to let Nathan close it out.
I like to just let the community know that this is not a one and done. Next week, we will be out mobilizing. We will be out converging on hot spots in Evanston, speaking to young people, speaking to residents, letting them know that they have our support. We'll be seeking advice from them on how to curb violence in this community, and we're going to continue to do things each weekend. So we're sacrificing our time, our effort, and our energy to make Evanston an even more conducive community. This is not just a Nathan Norman or a Kevin Brown or a Jeremy McCray. This is a collective body. This is a movement, a critical mass that has been assembled to support this community. We're not seeking